Good evening, Clovis. We are getting our inner geek on this evening with our Internet Safety Facebook Live session. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start talking a little bit about the history of the unit that we have in front of you while most of you guys are logging on and whatnot. First of all, before we go on to Internet Safety, we do want to let people know that we received a notification from AT&T Wireless letting everyone know that has an AT&T Wireless phone that you are currently unable to call 911. Internet access is still available. However, if you have an emergency, please call the non-emergency phone number for your law enforcement agency. AT&T is working on that issue, and they have notified us that they are doing so. Our telephone number for non-emergencies is 324-2800, and again, this only affects AT&T wireless phones for 911. So please have that non-emergency number as a backup, and we're going to get right into our Internet Safety. We're going to be talking about topics such as who your kids are talking to online, password and email security, what we think are good passwords and what passwords don't really work. Also parental controls for online gaming, social media, apps that your kids might be using, and things like that. So obviously we're going to be taking questions from you. Like I said, we're going to start it off with Officer Abby Pageant and Lieutenant Kurt Fleming, who are both members of our high-tech crimes unit. And Abby, let's start with talking about, give us a little history on the high-tech crime unit, maybe why it started and what you guys do behind these closed doors.
Well, can we take these off now?
Yeah, we're going to take these off now.
All right, good. Well, these were a funny thing that we started when you got inducted into the high-tech crimes unit from one of our past sergeants. Our high-tech crimes unit started in about 1999. Some of our detectives saw that we were getting an influx of child sexual exploitation cases and a lot of fraud. And so they felt that it was important at that time to start a unit in order to better combat these crimes and assist. In 2002, Clovis Police Department worked a huge case that was known as the Hamlet case, where 26 suspects were arrested, and 9 different countries and 100 different victims were all a part of this huge case. This is kind of what jumped off or began most of our high-tech crime unit. Right now, we have 4 members, and we work all cases from child sexual exploitation, fraud, drug cases, homicide cases. We do cell phone forensics, computer forensics, tablets, you name it. We basically assist patrol and investigations with anything, because as you all know, everybody's got a smartphone, a cell phone, or some sort of technology that's involved in most crimes. Some of the other things we do back here is we assist smaller agencies that don't have some of the equipment and the expertise that we do. We are also a part of the International, or it's ICAC, International Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is a national task force to try and combat some of those cases as well. Anything else?
Like Abby was saying, we also assist even some federal agencies that are local, that some of their labs are tied up a lot of times, and they'll come to us and use us for an additional resource. In 2002, when we built the police department, we actually at that time finally got a high-tech crime lab. It's not this particular location we're at now, it's just next door. It was a smaller building, or smaller room. We had maybe 3 computers in there, and then probably, say 6 years ago, we moved into this larger room here where we do a lot of our cell phone forensics, like we do cell phone extractions, computer forensics, and really anything dealing with digital evidence gets processed in this room here at the police department.
We have about 100 live viewers right now, but if you're watching us after the fact, we really do appreciate. We do really encourage questions, because that's the reason we are on Facebook Live, is to answer your questions, talk about your concerns, and like I said, some internet safety for your kids and whatnot. So we're going to go into one of our questions, and I'll ask Lieutenant Fleming this. There's a lot of talk about passwords and computers getting hacked and social media accounts getting hacked. mainly because passwords sometimes are extremely easy. Can you give us maybe some examples of some strong passwords, and then maybe how often people want to change their passwords on their accounts?
Yeah, I think if some of the kind of the most recent big events in the media where some politicians and other people have been hacked, it's been password 1 or 1234, a real simple password. So obviously the more complex the password, the better. If you can use an uppercase, a lowercase, if you can put a symbol in there and some numbers, I think you'll be good. 6, 7, 8 characters, and then try to change that every 30 days. I know it's difficult, and a lot of times you have multiple passwords and you end up forgetting them. If you can find an app in your phone that we'll probably discuss later, where you can store all those passwords for different things, it makes it a lot easier. But the more complex and the more often you change it, the more secure you'll be. Another good thing that I think is very difficult to be able to hack in would be a dual authentication. So if you put a password in and then you have, like my email will send me a text to my phone at that point, then you take that information, put it in, and then it logs you in. So it's kind of a double verification. So if you can do that, I know it's more difficult, but you're almost guaranteed that people aren't going to be able to get into your email or your other devices that way.
Okay.
Try and remember also common things that people have used are their birthdays, their children's names, their husband names. Try and keep in mind when you're making those passwords that those things are all readily available on public information databases. So try not to use something like that because people can get a hold of that information very easily, especially with some of the security passwords, you know, the questions that they ask. I was just having this conversation with a family member of mine yesterday, and everything she kept saying is one of the passwords she uses. I had actually been able to find that on public records.
Oh, wow.
So keep in mind birthdays, maiden names, don't use those kind of things. They're out there.
Okay, that's a really good tip. We're going to be talking a lot about some apps that we recommend or some websites with some great tips for parents. A lot of that is difficult to copy down while you are watching live or even after the fact. What we'll do either later tonight or tomorrow after the live session is we promise that we will be linking those apps and the websites that we are recommending parents look at, or just for general online safety, at the bottom of the Facebook Live session here. So you guys can easily click on that and have access to it. We don't expect you to copy it down or write anything else. It's not internet safety, but this is a pretty good question from Carson. He wants to know how many pieces of bacon is normal for breakfast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Tell Carson everything's better with bacon.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now you really owe me some bacon, Carson.
But let's jump into another question, and Abby, I'm going to ask you, can you give us a good practice when you get an email from someone that you don't recognize, or an email address that you don't recognize, or even someone that you think you may, and it has a link that you don't know? What are some good tips on email security as far as, one, opening an email from someone that you don't know, and two, clicking on or not clicking on the link that could be in an email that could access your computer, and why would that be a bad thing?
The things that I typically look for before I'm going to open is I make sure that I recognize it. I'm quite up to date with, you know, banking, email, websites, and things like that, and I keep those in like a more like a folder that I recognize so that I can look on it. You can always look at the entire email address, and the ones that are spam typically have like a garble of numbers or letters towards the end of it that you will not recognize. It's not just going to be bankofamerica.com. There's a lot of other things in that email address. Sometimes your name is misspelled. Sometimes your email address is slightly off. If it comes from your own email address, that's something to look for too. I've even gotten those as well. Especially with your friends, I would be very cautious opening anything you do not know.
We have one of our first questions from Elena, Lieutenant Fleming. I'll hand this over to you. She wants to know generically, what would you want to let children know about being safe on the internet, and who could be watching them or lurking in games and websites? what's some pretty good generic tips for kids either accessing the internet or on their social media accounts?
Really, I think it comes down to is don't ever, if you can teach the younger children or kids, is don't ever give out any personal information, even if you know the person, because we're not 100% that person is who they are, unless they're sitting right next to you, then obviously you can give them that information, but just don't give out personal information, any information that somebody could come to your house or school, anything that you normally frequent, a certain Starbucks or a certain McDonald's, whatever. People will go to steps to start sitting at those locations and waiting and trying to find you. So anything that you can limit that unless you know specifically who you're talking to, that would probably be my number one thing. I think later we'll talk about metadata when you take photos, making sure you have the security settings on your phone a certain way where people, if you send a simple text message to somebody you thought you knew, or they've been a friend, somebody you've been chatting with, if you send that text message with a photo that you've taken with the GPS coordinates in it, they could easily locate you. So maybe later, if we have time, we can do a demonstration to kind of show you that. But those would probably be the main things that I would be trying to pass on to my son or daughter to make sure they're safe on the internet.
Okay. One tip that I hear that's pretty basic is, especially on social media accounts, never add anyone that you don't personally know. Mm-hmm. If you think it's just someone from your school, even if they say they go to your school, if you don't personally know them, don't friend them. Don't send them a friend request. And parents, I think, even have the capability of, on their parental controls, about who can send you friend requests for if they're a child, or who can they accept friend request from. That can be locked down with whatever social media account, from what I believe. That's a really good tip. Abby, let's talk about concerns regarding some live gaming where your child's playing with an online gamer, whether they have a webcam on them or they believe that they're playing with another 12-year-old. Do you really know that they're a 12-year-old from another state? What are some things that parents can do to protect their children from adults or people you don't want talking to your children watching that video live? That could be kind of scary.
I think some of the things you can do, the best thing you can do as parents is to be completely involved with your kids in what they're doing. Sit down and play the games with them. Watch what they're doing and be a part of those conversations. If you can turn off the conversations entirely, that's a great way to do it. But if not, some of the tips that you could look for is to watch the person's language as they're speaking. You might notice that they're speaking at a higher level of education, or maybe even using cuss words you don't approve of. That might give you a tip that they're not the same age range as your child is as well. I would just be very cautious with that because, once again, you never know who's on the other side of the computer. It's completely possible to portray yourself as a 10-year-old and set up an account like that and then start playing with other 10-year-olds. And that's a good way to be able to friend people and start watching their movements and start later what we consider kind of grooming them to becoming your friend, giving out more personal information. And I can't stress enough, like Lieutenant Fleming already said, is do not give out any personal information, especially where you go to school. All of those records, can be accessed in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, that's a really good tip. Lieutenant Fleming, Jeff wants to know, apparently he's been getting a lot of spam phone calls, maybe from telemarketers or something on his cell phone. Is there any way to stop that? Maybe the National Do Not Call List covers cell phones. Are there any tips that you can provide to him, maybe?
There is what's it called again?
The National, I think it's the Do Not Call Registry.
I think that does apply to cell phones also. I honestly, Jeff, this is Jeff, correct?
Yeah.
I get the same calls. A lot of times they're very frustrating. I get one that's every day. It seems like it's at 3 o'clock from like Fireball or something. So I haven't tried that yet. I believe it applies to both landlines and cell phones. So you might give that a try. If the number comes up, what I've been doing is just send it to my block list. So when that number comes up again, I don't even see it. There's a couple different things you can. If it's the same number, you could block it. The one I've had, it's been multiple different numbers, but the same message over and over. So Short of blocking it or using that do not call list. That's probably the only advice I have on that, honestly.
And I was going to say that exact thing. If a number comes in that I don't recognize, I immediately block it, especially if they don't leave a voicemail. It's a pretty good generic tip. Jeff, what we'll do is we'll confirm that the don't call list includes cell phones, and if it doesn't, we'll provide that link on our Facebook live session here at the bottom as soon as we have an opportunity to do so. Lieutenant Fleming, back to you. We've heard a lot about fake apps, like the fake calendar app that has maybe a secret photo album on your child's phone that you're not aware of. How can a parent see or control what their kids download on their phones? Let's start with that. What can they do?
I'm an Apple guy, so I could give you a lot of information about Apple. Android, I know they have the same thing. I just couldn't give you the specifics on it. But from a parent side, if your kid had let's say an iPhone and you had an iPhone, or maybe they had an iPad, you can give them the same Apple ID. You can control on the actual iPad with a password, locking out internet. You can lock out certain videos. You can just make it G-rated depending on what their age is, what content you want them to see. You can really restrict a lot of things. You can make it where they can't purchase things. They can't download apps or delete apps. They can't make in-app purchases. You can really control and lock down what they do. If you don't want to be that restrictive, as long as they're on the same account, you can log in and see what apps have been downloaded on their phone. Go in and do some research, find out what those applications do. If they're apps you don't approve of, or they're apps where they have hidden secret places, I mean, really, who needs the app to hide things that, unless you're trying to hide things that you don't want your parents to see? So, really, that's the way I would do it, to have the talk with my kid. Just see what's on their phone, monitoring it from the account where I can see what they're downloading and deleting and kind of what's going on. For younger kids, obviously you want to filter down. If they're on YouTube, make sure it's the kids' YouTube so it has more restricted things on it. We had an example of that the other day, but go in there and restrict it to G-rated, certain things, so that your kids aren't surfing, Nerf gun wars on YouTube, and all of a sudden the next video that rolls up is something totally inappropriate for them. So just be aware of that, be involved, and look at the applications and stuff they're using.
It sounds like there's a theme of spend a little bit of time with your kid, whether they're playing the online gaming or whether they're, they have their own phone and they're downloading, just a little time and sitting next to them while they're on their phone, seeing what they're doing, and then maybe taking their device at some point and just going through it, being a little proactive goes a long way. Abby, Ali wants to know, can your webcam, whether it's on a mobile device or not, can it be turned on without you physically turning it on? And if so, is there any way to protect yourself against that?
Not that I know of. When you're talking about mobile devices, you specifically have to give the applications permission to access your camera. And so as long as you give that application permission to access your camera, then it will either run in the background, run during that program, or only when you allow it to. I remember something going around a long time ago about that, and everybody was freaking out about Facebook turning on your camera, when in reality, it was one of the first that actually came out and just made you aware of that permission. And so that's kind of what the cell phones. The web cameras, I believe, work the same way. It would involve your computer and what you allow it to run. But I'm not familiar with anything that turns on by itself.
Okay.
I'll just jump in.
Please.
Yeah.
Cell phones are really secure when it comes to that, but if you're still, obviously on a PC, which most people still have a PC for the most part, your computer can get infected if you click on a certain email. There's been old viruses that are out there. You click on that, and it gives the person access to your camera, different controls on your computer. So it is possible, maybe on your webcam at home, just turn it around when you're not using it, unplug it.
But you have to click on something,
you
likely for
would
the
have
virus
to
get in there.
You would have to go through an email phishing scam where you actually clicked on a link, which could give somebody access and you wouldn't even know it. So obviously don't click on links like we we're telling you earlier in your mail. Unplug your camera if you're worried about that, or just turn it around unless you're using it. Would be my suggestion.
Okay. Jerry, actually, he's one of our patrol volunteers. He wants to know a little bit about Facebook tracking your messaging, or where they take your photos as far as your location services, which I believe we were briefly mentioning before. And his example was one of his friend's children were posting vacation photos while they were on vacation to whatever social media account they have. Do we recommend that being a good thing, a bad thing? And if they want to do post photos, are there any tips, maybe turning your location services off?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to be out of town on vacation, me personally, I wouldn't put any of that information out until you got back, and then post all the pictures of you being out of town. That's just opening the door for any criminal that wants to break into your house. You're kind of telling them, hey, look, I'm not home. It's just inviting them in. So me personally, I wouldn't post any of that information. Once you get back, then tell everybody about your trip, post the pictures. Unless obviously somebody's staying at your home, you might be all right. But as far as the settings on the Facebook, I'll defer to you on that. I'm not a super Facebook junkie, so.
Well, and I'm not, completely an expert on this too, but I do dabble a little bit. A lot of times, and once again, you have to allow it to do that. So you can change any of this information in your privacy settings as far as it goes. But Facebook will track your, through location services, it will track where you're at. It'll allow you to check in. Once you check into those places, you've obviously told people where you're at. Sometimes it can share those photos with other people that have checked into those places. One of the things that I do is, your photos as well. All that stuff can be tracked. So when you are posting things with Facebook, sometimes a little, when you see your when you update your status, it'll say who you're sharing with, and that would be like friends, friends of friends, friends only. And then the next little blip, if you have your location services turned on, will actually have the city or the place you're in sometimes. Anytime I'm near my home or things like that, I click off that specifically every single time, just because I don't want there to be, a record of where I've been. The other thing you can do is, it's possible to, when you get those montages and those slideshows that Facebook now allows you to do, it will show where you've been, and some of them can actually print up an entire map of all the places that you have been. So you have to be very, very careful with what you allow your location services to follow.
Interesting. And I think also that goes back to who are your friends on your social media account that you're posting your photos to? Do you know them physically all? Do you know them in person, or are these just people that you think you may know, or people from everywhere that, if you get a friend request, you accept it? Be a little cautious of that, because you can share your location, but it matters who. If you only have friends and family that you know in person, it's different than if you have 1,000 friends, because it's very rare that people actually physically know 1,000 people and that are, they're friends on social media.
Well, and keep in mind, if you tag somebody in your post or in your picture, that opens it up for a whole new set of people to be able to see that photo or your location when it's friends of friends. So be cautious with some of that.
A follow-up question from Jeff. I think Lieutenant Fleming, you had mentioned that you block the phone number if it comes up and it's unknown. Can you give an explanation on how to block the number, maybe when it's there showing on your screen? I believe you can swipe to the left, correct?
I thought on mine it had a little circle with the I for info. You can go on there,
Right.
and then scroll down, and it says block
I think it
number.
says block this number, block this caller.
That's for iOS. Android, I'm not 100%, but I know on iOS, to the right, there's a circle with a line for an I for information. Click on that, scroll down, and it should say block this number or block this caller.
Okay. Jeff, what we'll do is we'll check with Android in case you are an Android user. If it's different than what he explained, we can go ahead and post that as well. For those of you who have asked questions that we haven't gotten to yet, they might be repetitive, so you maybe scroll up and we've answered that question already. If we don't get to your question for whatever reason and we're not done yet, we'll definitely type in the answer at a later time, because like I said, most of you are watching this after the fact. So again, thank you for joining us. and this isn't necessarily a computer question, but Richard wants to know, because of identity theft concerns, is it illegal for people to go through your trash when you set it out at the curb? I don't know if that's city-based or maybe, or is that, I think it's public property when it's out at the curb. Is there anything that they can do as far as restricting people from going through your trash once it's out on the curb, obviously? Do you know of anything? I don't.
It is.
It is illegal.
It is illegal. I know within the city of Clovis we have a municipal code. It's an anti-scavenging code. Those apply to public dumpsters and those apply to your dumpsters as well. You can call the police department on the non-emergency number and let them know that somebody is out there looking through your trash. I would still, even though it is legal, sometimes it's hard to prove or catch them right at that moment. So I would be very cautious with the type of personal information you put in the trash still. We catch people all the time with handfuls of and stacks and folders of people's personal information. Buy a shredder. It's really important. Shred your personal information. All those spam credit card applications you get with your name on it, people fill those out and send them in. So shred those and be very careful with what handwritten or those kind of letters that you put in the trash.
Michelle had a question, and I can answer that. You had asked who they can contact, who you can contact for some other questions that you may not want to put in a public forum. We do have our messaging capability on Facebook. You can easily send us a private message. I answer those usually within about 10 minutes. However, if I don't know the answer, I can definitely defer to someone who does know in the department. We can definitely get you that answer, so that's not a problem. If you do have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking in public, our messaging services are turned on. So it's a real quick fix, and the conversation is between us and you solely. And I don't know who can, which one of you wants to answer this one, but a lot of the time parents can set curfews on their child's cell phone, whether it's 8 o'clock or whatever time they deem necessary, to restrict text messages and phone calls. Is there any way around that? Like, I think we've heard of messaging apps that that obviously doesn't go through text messages. And if there's anything that parents can do, if their children are getting around that curfew and texting and calling friends or people that the parents may not want their kids talking to after hours.
If you're strictly, if you're going in there in the parental controls and you're strictly setting the messaging for the phone for, let's say it's AT&T or Sprint, and you're saying no more messaging after this time, absolutely they can still message using different applications, Viber, Tiger Text, probably instant messaging through Facebook and Snapchat. There's a lot of different ways to communicate. There's hundreds of thousands of applications out there. But if you're strictly setting the service provider, the cell phone provider, and saying no more messaging, that's probably not going to get it done. I think the best thing is just, especially for younger kids, is just take the phone from them. Don't allow them to have it. That way, it's being taken care of. For older kids, you just have to really go through the settings in there and really try to lock down. I don't know how in depth it gets you for the curfew setting, as far as all the applications and stuff like that. I think short of taking the phone, it's going to be very difficult to do that.
That's all I was going to add. Take the phone. Even if they're in high school, even if they're older, take their phone. You are the parent, you're in charge. Use it as a disciplinary tool. Make them earn it. A cell phone, just because it's very popular now, is not a right. It is not something that they are entitled to. It is a privilege, and it's something that we all get to use. I know it's convenient for us with GPS tracking as well when we want to know where our kids are, but I'm sure we'll touch on that in a little bit too. But don't forget that a cell phone is a privilege, it's a tool, it's fun, it's gaming, and it can also be a problem. It is also one of the things that works wonders in my household when I can't get my little guy to do what he needs to do. The iPad, which does not have cell phone capabilities, is the first thing to go. It works wonders.
That's a really good tip. Someone asked what our non-emergency number is. That's always available on our Facebook page, any of our social media accounts. It's area code 559-324-8255. 2800. We have cool little card magnets if you ever want to stop into the lobby and grab one. They're free. One of our records clerk can easily give them to you. Elena is a little bit curious how you guys use the computers behind us to solve a crime, or what you can go into, what information can you give on how you use these computers to solve a crime that maybe happened on a computer. Let's talk about child predators. How we collect their computer. What information can we get from them if we do want to talk about that at all?
I'll let you go with that one. I don't know how much you want to share.
I was doing something. I'm sorry, I missed the.
No, Elena wants to
Sorry.
know how we use computers to solve crimes. She sees these computers behind us, and it brings up the question how we use them to solve our crimes, other than just looking through the storage on them.
We have different forensic programs on all the computers. Some specific for Windows-based machines, Mac-based. We have a couple different cell phone extraction tools. Really, just to not go into too much depth and information, and we don't want to give out all our tips to make our job more difficult, but really these tools allow us to hook up a hard drive, take it out of the computer, we put it into our machine, we make sure we have a device in between that doesn't allow any changes to the hard drive because we want to preserve the evidence as original. But we can go in there and recover, let's say, deleted pictures, deleted messages on Facebook, a lot of different things that you do on your computer. We can use different programs and go into the hard drive. There's space on the hard drive, it's deleted space or unallocated space in the hard drive. And we can go back and pull pictures from, you might be surprised on some of the stuff we can pull back. So that's why it's always good. Another tip, when you are getting rid of an old computer, a good idea is to pull the hard drive out, because that's where all the information is stored on. You can throw the computer in the garbage and have no concerns in the world, but the hard drive is the key to where all the information is stored on. So when you are getting rid of that old computer, take that out. I don't know, take a hammer to it, wipe it. There is programs you can wipe it, but you want to make sure that's destroyed, unless you want to keep that, as information you want to keep for further. But if you are getting rid of something or selling it to somebody, make sure you wipe it before you give it to them, because that's a lot of your personal information is on there.
That's a really good tip. Did you want to give them an example of the location service? Did you get a chance to do that?
Yeah, if I can switch seats with you,
Yeah.
I'll show you real quick.
He's going to give us a really cool
we gonna
example
get-
of
We probably will.
location services and whatnot, and how they're used and why they could be good or bad.
I should have sat somewhere else, but yeah, I apologize.
Get ready. Don't trip over.
So earlier we were talking about location services on your phone and making sure you turn that off when you're taking pictures. I just wanted to show kind of a brief example of why you want to be careful. If you're uploading to Facebook and different applications, it's stripping that information out most likely, but you need to double check that. But if your child or whoever is sending text messages or emailing photos, none of that information has changed. It's original picture, so it has all the metadata is what it's called. It's information. So I'll just pull up a picture here for an example. So this is a picture I took of the front of the police department today. So this is a free program online that you can download. Everything I'm using right now is anybody can use. It's free stuff. So you can simply go in here, click this I for information. It's going to give you information about this picture, the size, and things like that. If you hit this button down here, XF info, or metadata is what that's referring to, it's going to bring up all the information about the name of the file, what camera it was taken with, the size of it, the date, if the flash was on, if the flash was off, all kinds of information, the GPS coordinates. If you simply go down here and say show in Google Earth, it's going to open up Google Earth and it's going to take me right to where that picture was taken, which is scary if your kids are sharing information online. So we're going to scroll right down here, and it's going to go to Street View, and well, that's exactly where that picture was taken at. Just one more quick example. We're we're going to take this, a different photo that, make sure I got the right photo here. So I took this when I was in Seattle. So same thing, we're going to go up here and hit the information. It's going to give us all the information about this. This is back when I had an iPhone 6, so this is a little bit older. And then we're going to hit show Google Earth, and now it's going to take us all the way up to Seattle if it doesn't freeze up here.
And so this is a free software that anyone can download. If your location services are turned on, they have access to this information, even though they didn't take the photo?
If whoever took the photo, if they had their information services on, it's going to store all this information. So this is...
That's scary.
We lost it. So yeah, so in the settings on your camera, if you have that on for information or location services, it's going to embed all that information in the photo, so anybody can take a software program and say, show me the GPS coordinates in this photo, and show me on Google Earth, and it's going to take you right to where that photo was taken. So it's very important to make sure if you're going to be sharing photos that information is turned off. Then again, but if you have it and you're doing it on Facebook, there are security settings that when you upload it, it will strip that information out and do that for you. So just be aware that that's out there, and that is something that could happen.
Before we end, it's already 7:37. I know it doesn't seem like that long. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet that maybe a parental tip, anything that we can think of? Obviously, we can always comment after the fact. And like I said from before, if you joined us late in the game or you're watching after the fact, any apps or links that we've mentioned during our live session here, so you don't have to write it down or figure it out, what we'll do is we will post that in comments below the Facebook session probably tomorrow. But before we go, is there any generic tips that we haven't talked about that maybe would be good for a parent to know that you can think we haven't covered yet?
That's it. The number one thing that we see come back here that is innocent people making really bad mistakes is sexting, taking pictures. Juveniles send it to other juveniles. Once you send something like that, and this is the part where you really need to sit down and talk with your kids, is once you take that picture and it's sent, it can never be brought back. It is out there and it's going to be shared and shared and shared, and we can never get it back. So that's really crucial to sit down and explain that to them. And also explain to them that by taking a picture of somebody that's under 18 is you are producing child pornography, for better term, and which is a crime. And as soon as you share that, that's also a crime. So possession, creation, and sharing are all big crimes. So that's probably the biggest thing to sit down, explain that once you send it, it can't be brought back. You're actually committing a crime, and we see that a lot back here.
Just quickly to clarify, you don't need to be an adult in order for that to be a crime for you. You can have a juvenile with a photo of another juvenile, and that is still a crime even though they're a juvenile, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
It's completely illegal.
That's really good information for parents to know, because that could mess a kid's life up for what they think is an innocent act.
Not only that, the speed in which gossip travels these days, just imagine how fast that picture travels. So you think you're giving one person permission to see it. You're not, because they get mad at you for one instant, and now it's a group message, or it's posted on Instagram or Facebook or Vine or any of these other videos, and once somebody else has possession of it, they can do whatever they like with it. Whether it's illegal or not, we see it all the time. It's fast, and it's, you can't take it back. So just caution your kids, don't even take those pictures to begin with.
One thing I want to leave you is, I think the theme of this is take some time, be proactive, look through your kids' phones, look through your phones. If you don't recognize something or you don't like something, delete it. Be the parent, not the friend. Please feel free to ask us any questions after the fact. We would be glad to answer them in a public or a private setting. And again, thank our experts, Officer Pageant and Lieutenant Fleming. And my name is Ty, and we'll see you for our next Facebook Live session, which we'll close it up. So.
And one last thing, I want to thank Clovis Unified for putting this out on
Yes.
Peach Jar. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys.
Thank you so much.